Hello again. Welcome to this video clip looking at clause 9 of ISO 9001 and ISO 27001. So it's possible to look at both of them together because apart from one set of criteria, the clauses of ISO 9001 are largely the same as 27001 in this instance. So the difference here would be to do with customer satisfaction, which has no immediate implication for 27001, except when it comes to feedback with regard to information security concerns as part of the statement of applicability controls. So let's look at the criteria at high level. 911 general. The organization shall determine what needs to be monitored and measured, the methods for monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation needed to ensure valid results, when monitoring and measuring shall be performed, which is an important point, and when the results of monitoring and measuring shall be analysed and evaluated. The organisation shall evaluate the performance and effectiveness of the management system, and the organisation shall retain appropriate documented information as evidence of the results. So looking at that, there was a reference towards the end there to, in point D, when the results from monitoring and measuring shall be analysed and evaluated. When? So you've got to keep in mind that even though the standard is very much in a life cycle, first you do the work and then you monitor and measure, really you've got to consider that the monitoring and measuring could be part and parcel of the cycle through operations, because we've spoken during the operations, particularly when you go to 8.1 for the planning of the delivery of services. It's all about, what do we need to monitor and measure through operations in order to produce that confidence and surety that we've achieved the requirements of the operation. So that has to be kept in mind. I think really, the clarity of the criteria is very straightforward. What has to be monitored and measured? The methods for monitoring and measuring. So Enable ISO customers will be aware of our approach of using the process risk register to document requirements, and that would include monitoring and measurement requirements, and it would belong under the responsibilities and interdependencies column, because there would be a responsibility of the individual for carrying out the monitoring, and there would be an interdependency then on making a record of that measurement. So it's just something to keep in mind if you use the system to that advantage. And so we'll have a look just now at customer satisfaction. Clause 912, customer satisfaction. The organisation shall monitor customers' perceptions of the degree to which their needs and expectations have been fulfilled. The organisation shall determine the methods for obtaining, monitoring, and reviewing this information. Note, examples of monitoring customer perceptions can include customer surveys, customer feedback on delivered products and services, of course, meetings with customers, market share analysis, compliments, warranty claims, and dealer reports. So that's just a set of examples there. I guess with regard to customer satisfaction, I'm kind of part of an auditing community that would be very aware that when we go in as auditors to a lot of client organizations, they have bundles of surveys, and sometimes we read through these surveys and they're meaningless. There might be recommendations that have been made that haven't been accounted for, and the surveys largely haven't served the purpose of obtaining customer performance opinion and the voice of the customer in that Six Sigma term. So, we at Enable ISO, we recommend a methodology called the Net Promoter Score. And that fits in, it could be a formal survey, but it could also be informal. So from the note in this clause, we see meetings with customers in the last sentence there. And it could be the case that, when a salesperson or makes contact with a customer, at the end of the conversation, they go through the Net Promoter Score methodology, which is two questions. Firstly, you ask the customer to rate your performance, and to attribute a score. It can be 0 to 10, or 0 to 5, something like that, 1, 2, 3, whatever methodology you want to use. It's not prescribed. But the key here is the second question, is the qualifier, where you would ask for the customer for the reason or rationale behind giving you that score. And that's the bit that needs to be noted. So it's something that architects and engineers and project managers will be well aware of as they work through particularly a long-term development or a medium-term development, where there are multiple site meetings and design reviews and so on. Well, opportunities along the way to gather the voice of the customer need to be taken and documented to meet the requirements of ISO 9001. So let's just pause for a moment and we'll have a look at analysis and evaluation. Okay, for this clause, we have to consider, in 911, we looked at how we're going to carry out monitoring and measuring it within operations. And the analysis and evaluation moment is determined at that point. That could be within operations, or it could be documented and recorded for future analysis, which could be through the management review or internal audit functions, which we'll come to later. And we also looked in 912 at customer satisfaction, and particularly for ISO 9001, gathering that voice of the customer so that can be contribute and be an input into the analysis and evaluation clause. So for 913, analysis and evaluation, the criteria is as follows. The organization shall analyze and evaluate appropriate data and information arising from monitoring and measurement. The results of analysis shall be used to evaluate A, conformity of products and services, B, the degree of customer satisfaction, C, the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system, D, if planning has been implemented effectively, referring back to clause 6, the effectiveness of actions taken to address risks and opportunities, the performance of external providers, the need for improvements to the quality management system. Note, methods to analyze data can include statistical techniques. Okay, so quick just summary of that will be, all companies and organizations we deal with will have their own unique way of measuring performance throughout processes, and indeed with customer satisfaction. The standard doesn't ask you to change that. It asks you just to, document it and make sure you have appropriate record keeping to demonstrate that you do that analysis and evaluation well. So I guess there's probably an assumption to be made here that most organizations we deal with would be a good portion, maybe, a 70%-ish kind of portion of the way toward meeting the criteria. Oftentimes the absences just be that where, particularly visual inspections are being made, there might be no record of that visual inspection of the person carrying that out. So there's nothing to review, in fact. And there's no comments documented, particularly in small organizations where 1 or 2 people are managing a number of different functions within an organization. A lot of the analysis and evaluation, it's not documented, it's just kept in mind. And that's something that, there's a change in mindset there. For organizations where they would have effective monitoring and measuring already happening, I think, particularly with regard to 27001, and we look at that criteria in a moment, there's a lot of stuff that's automatically being documented, a lot of data that's available. And a lot of times we just have to kind of review that data that's available to us to see is there anything in there that matters, particularly with dashboards to support software applications and so on. And the way I would look at it is, when the people developing that software application built a reporting section of the application for customer use, well, there must be some good information in there to be used for that analysis and evaluation. So an example would be, any CRM system, Salesforce included, they have good dashboards which provide summary information and statistical analysis, which, is meeting one of the opportunities given for analysis in the note at the end of the clause. But I think you should get the message really that it's not just about analysis and evaluation of operations. We must bring in the degree of customer satisfaction. We must bring in our, where it's necessary, to the extent necessary indeed, our review and evaluation of the effectiveness of training and planning and technical controls we've put in place, and the effectiveness of mitigative actions that we've taken to mitigate risks along the way. Okay, let's look at ISO 27001 Clause 9.1. So Clause 9.1 of ISO 9001 was broken into 3 subclauses. But I think the reason we can deal with them together, I think once we omit the customer satisfaction clause, the Clause 9.1.1 and 9.1.3 combined is concisely stated here in ISO 27001 in a single clause. So let's have a quick look. The organization shall evaluate the information security performance and the effectiveness of the information security management system. The organization shall determine, and I'm going to be shorthand here, what needs to be monitored and measured, including security processes and controls, the methods for monitoring, and the method selected should produce comparable, reproducible results to be considered valid. When monitoring and measuring shall be performed, who shall monitor and measure, when the results from monitoring and measurement shall be analysed and evaluated, who shall analyse and evaluate these results. And again, as with all ISO standards, the organisation shall retain appropriate documented information, so on. Okay, so the real difference here is that you're being asked to monitor and measure the controls that are in place to protect the organization's data through operations. And, that's wherever the organization carries out processing on the data, including through third-party applications. I suppose what an ISO auditor is going to be looking for when they come in is that you have a reasonably frequent and regular approach to monitoring and testing those and validating, I suppose, those technical controls. So you would refer to the statement of applicability in most cases. And then if you are, for 9001, using the methodology that we set up for auditing our processes, to include consideration for information security controls and training and so on that are put in place for each of those processes. So that way, in an integrated way, for integrated management system, which the total management system is, you're meeting the requirements of ISO 9001. And for ISO 27001, you're meeting the requirement for testing and validating the effectiveness of the control that you've put in place. So that's the first funnel, I suppose, into this clause from our thinking on ISO 9001 and how it can benefit, using the integrated management system approach to meet our needs to ISO 9000 or 27001. And then separately to that, we will have technical controls which kind of stand up on their own from a point of view of monitoring and measuring responsibilities. In other words, there may be controls like VPNs and access controls, failovers to meet, connectivity and power requirements and so on. Well, those technical controls, particularly where they're critical to the business, an auditor will expect frequent testing of those controls with good reporting. So the internal audit function kicks in there, which we speak about in a subsequent video. But as part of the internal audit program, if you like, we would include, however frequent it needs to be, weekly, monthly, quarterly inspections of these controls to make sure that they remain suitable and effective. So just to summarize, between 9001 and 27001, what the standard is asking us to do in clause 9.1 is to consider all of those things that we need to monitor and measure throughout our operations, with customer satisfaction for 9001, with the technical SOA controls for 27001, and within our process auditing then, validate where those technical controls have been put in place to make sure that the activity controlled is carried out suitable and effective, and that the control is working for us to our expected level at the very least. So I'm hoping that's enough for now. Please get in touch with us through the website, either by direct email or through the chat box where you can ask any question. Thank you very much, and keep up the good work. Thank you.